is Julie Wooten, and today I am going to be talking to you about historical thinking through primary sources. And in particular, I wanted to do The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. The great thing about The Jungle is you have so many avenues and things that you can share with the students that are really cool and really interesting. And I found this quote. It says, "I aimed at the public's heart and by accident I hit it in the stomach." And especially if you do this activity with your students before lunch, they're gonna love you for it. So the objective for today is how to teach The Jungle by Upton Sinclair using sourcing, contextualization, observation, interpretation, and connection, and how it fits in their lives. So the big question is, how effective were the progressive era reforms in addressing some of the major problems of industrialization, particularly the Chicago meatpacking plants? So this is my hook. Did you know that in 1902, there were 300 million head of cattle and 5 million hogs that came through Packingtown in Chicago in the meatpacking plants? So, step one, what I would do is I would give them this chart to complete, and depending on how much you have covered with them, you can have them do the first column, the second column, even up to the third column. And then after the reading, they can come back and finish with the fourth and the fifth columns. But hopefully you will have taught them a little bit about who the muckrakers were, what their goals were, and a little bit about Upton Sinclair. Then you have the kids just observe. You're just gonna ask them to skim read the material and don't comprehend anything yet. I know that's shocking, but don't let them comprehend yet. You just want them to look for descriptive or interesting words and any words that they do not understand or know. So have them circle the descriptive words and underline any of the words that they do not know. Give them a few minutes to silently glance over the material and then come back and talk about it. Talk about especially what they didn't know. We'll use your context clues. What did it look like in the sentence? What do you think it means? Where have you heard this word before? And then here's an example of how the students would circle and underline anything that they saw. For example, rejected, moldy and white, dirt, or dirty. And then a couple of the words that when I taught this, I can remember the kids not knowing what borax and glycerin were. They heard of it, but they weren't really sure what it was. And then consumption, especially the disease that was popular at the time. Also, show pictures. They love pictures. And also include other gross facts that came from the book. One gross fact that I like to talk about is how the stirrers of the giant vats of lard would sometimes actually fall into the lard. And of course, they were done because the lard was boiling and they would just dig them out and they were dead. Or how they might chop off a thumb and they just would leave the thumb in there, wrap up their hand and keep right on working. After you've done that, have your students read deeper. You want them to interpret it. What details tell you about the working conditions of the meatpacking plants? Now they're already going to know they're really gross, but get more specific. Ask them to be more specific. And then step 4, think about the words you circled. Why would Upton Sinclair put these very, very vivid terms in his reading? What is the point he's wanting to get across? And so these are great discussion items, and you'll be surprised how much your kids come up with that you don't even think about at the time. Then step 5, this is a chart that they can complete after they had learned a little bit about Upton Sinclair, but then after they had read the excerpt from The Jungle. So what was going on before 1906? And I've included some possible answers. Of course, we just got out of the Gilded Age, and the Progressive Era is all about fixing the Gilded Age. Laissez-faire, because laissez-faire is going to be seen on every end-of-year test that they make of any state. Exploitation of workers, plus the boom time of the era. Then, during 1906, the book is coming out. He's written articles in magazines This is going to lead to outrage and a huge need for some new legislation. And then after 1906, how did Roosevelt handle it? Well, he passed the Meat Inspection Act, the Pure Food and Drug Act. He made sure there were labels on your food with all of the ingredients. I even show my kids a bottle of water and say, look for the ingredients on your bottle of water. They're there, just water. Lastly, we go back to the big question. Using now all of the information that the students have learned, have them write an essay or a paragraph or something showing that they understand how effective reforms were when addressing the problems of industrialization. Make sure you include political, social, economic effects, because again, that's a lot a part of our end of course exams. Other thought questions that you can either put as part of the essay, as part of the discussion. How is the jungle a primary source if it's fiction? Well, remember, he didn't write it under his name, but he is the one that went in and did the investigations. What is the significance of the title? The kids love to talk about the title. Why is it called The Jungle? It has nothing to do with Mowgli and the jungle, but it is our form of a jungle. What is the purpose of a muckraker? Which they should already know because you've already taught it. And then do you think this legislation would have passed without the public's attention? Like, it was in the works and you knew it was gross, but what does it take to get that legislation passed? Other ideas and thoughts, connections to today. Why is this important to us today? Thank God we have those ingredients on our food. Thank God we have the Pure Food and Drug Act and inspectors constantly going in there. What are some ways people try to make change today? It only took 6 months for the jungle to come out. How long does it take for legislation to pass today and to get the point across? Reminders for teachers to also explain, the goal wasn't food safety. It was workers. It was the workers. Like, how did they deal with the work life? It was an investigative reporting. So think about secret shoppers of today. Think about the show Undercover Boss, where they go in and try to look around and see what's going on. And the main thing that I tell my students is, you don't know what you don't know. They didn't know they were being exploited. They didn't know how badly they were being treated. And then it critiques the American dream. Remember, we are a melting pot. People come here to get rich and to have the best life ever. But is that really what's happening? No. And then other interesting facts, yes, there were inspectors, but they stayed quiet because they were being bought by the government. Political machines. Think about the political machines. And Roosevelt and Sinclair were not friends. They were not buddies, okay? Remember, Sinclair was a socialist. Other forms of differentiation, it can be done on paper or electronically, all right? Some of us have one-to-one devices, some of us do not. You've got all these different levels that you can adhere to, accommodations, higher level thinking students or classes. So the reading can be shortened or lengthened, enlarged for those that can't see very well, recorded, chunked. That's like on every accommodation for some of these special ed kids is chunking. Read aloud as a class, like I've been known to actually read the excerpt to my lower level classes, or peer-to-peer. You read a paragraph, I'll read a paragraph. It can be done in groups or with a partner or individually, okay? And then in the end, you can use released in the course test items to check for understanding. Other ideas, we got another spin on the 3-2-1. 3 sentences or phrases that are confusing. 2 sentences you can actually visualize. 1 emotion you felt and 1 question you still have. And then the window notes. These are very popular. So the facts, the feelings, the questions, the ideas. Kind of a spin on the 3-2-1. In conclusion, the jungle is such a fun resource to teach. I love teaching it every year. The kids get into it. You really will have a hard time with kids not being interested because it is kind of gross. But it also paints such a vivid picture of our history in the meatpacking plants. And I think the kids will really love it and appreciate it.